Reading. Key concepts. Reading, like the book, is something we sometimes take for granted. Most of us spend large amounts of time reading text, from social media to formal documents, throughout the day. But we don't usually take time to consider how reading works. So in this video, I'll present a few important ideas about reading as we understand it today. These ideas serve as a kind of snapshot of reading theory. I hope these ideas also inspire you to look in more detail at the work of some of the scholars and researchers I will reference. So our first key concept is this: reading is complex. As any child or parent knows, learning to read a text is a process. It takes practice and effort. Unlike speaking or playing, reading does not come naturally to humans. Marianne Wolf is a professor of child psychology who studies learning and child development. She specializes in dyslexia and other neurological issues that can disrupt the brain's ability to process alphabetic text. If you are interested in the science of reading and how the brain learns to process texts, her book, Proust and the Squid, is an excellent place to start. She writes the following: "We were never born to read. Human beings invented reading only a few thousand years ago. And with this invention, we rearranged the very organization of our brain, which in turn expanded the ways we were able to think, which altered the intellectual evolution of our species. Reading is one of the single most remarkable inventions in human history. The ability to record history is one of its consequences." That's from page 3 of Proust and the Squid. So if you're interested in this cognitive science, kind of how the brain reads, these are two books that I would reference to you. One is her book, Marianne Wolf, on the left, and then also Stanislas Dehaene, who is a French scientist who studies how the human brain processes letters and numbers. His book is called Reading in the Brain: The Science of How We Read. Those are both wonderful sources. They're available in cheap paperback and Kindle editions. Really, really great, rich surveys of the kind of current thinking about the neuroscience of reading, which is incredibly fascinating. Now, the second kind of key idea about reading is that reading is active. It might seem like reading is just a matter of decoding the text on the page or on the screen, but the truth is that reading is an active process of creating meaning. So let's take the following famous text. "To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them." You may recognize that as Shakespeare from Hamlet. So a reader who has read Shakespeare before will bring a lot more to this text than one who is not. An actor who has played the part of Hamlet will experience the text differently from a scholar who is writing a critical analysis of the play. So we bring as much to the text as we take out of it. Reading is a process of creating meaning in the interplay between the reader and the text. Now, similarly, you might imagine that when you are reading a text, your eyes are following along the lines from left to right in an orderly procession. In fact, our eyes jump around the page or screen rapidly, and our brains do a lot of work to fill in the gaps. We often see on the page what we think should be there, which is one reason that proofreading is harder than it looks. Now, you've probably seen images like these of eye-tracking heat maps on web pages. Now, these show the areas where readers tend to focus most visual attention. Now, in the West, at least, where the alphabet and sentences go from left to right, in the West, most readers tend to focus most on the top and left edges of a page, often creating a kind of F-shaped pattern with their eyes as they scan pages. And if you look up F-shaped pattern or heat maps or reading on the web, you will find all kinds of studies and sources about how our eyes jump around the page and sort of create meaning by grabbing little bits and pieces. And it turns out that we are creating and filling in gaps as much as we were actually reading. So the whole idea that reading is an active process is really exceptionally reinforced by current research about how we read digital text and hypertext on the web. Now, our third key concept is that reading is social. Even though we view reading as a solitary activity, it is profoundly social. We make sense of stories and information based on what we have experienced in our own lives and what we have been taught in the past. And basically, what we're talking about with our friends at the moment. And one recent development in reading is the growth of these online reading groups and sites like Goodreads, which is on the screen here, designed to allow readers to connect to other readers and to share opinions and feedback on what they read. And of course, there's also fan fiction, where readers go so far as to literally rewrite their favorite stories, whether it's Harry Potter or Star Trek or what have you. And fan fiction is another example of the growth of this social reading that has been made possible around the internet. So reading kind of went from social in the Middle Ages because people read out loud to their family and friends because not very many people could read. So reading was social and something done in a group. Then we went to the print culture and everybody read silently to themselves. Now we're kind of returning to this old model of reading as something that you do socially as a group. So that brings us to the fourth and final idea, which is that reading changes over time, and it's changing now. The idea that reading changes over time is probably almost self-evident to us today because we are experiencing this profound shift from print to digital reading. As Nicholas Carr pointed out, we may be moving away from a kind of deep focus approach to reading and toward some new kind of skimming and scanning. And as Stephen Johnson argues, we are also more readily able to connect what we are reading to other texts and to other sources by means of hypertext links and other technologies that create a web of ideas in place of a static text. Now, the idea of multimodal literacy is the idea that reading today encompasses not just words, but also images and graphics. Günter Kress, seen on the screen here in this YouTube video, Günter is one of the scholars who has developed a body of work around the idea of multimodal reading and multimodal literacy and the importance of being able to read visual texts as well as written texts. Now, the printed book was, of course, a necessary precondition for the spread of literacy. Today, the internet shapes how and what we read and changes our focus. How we understand what it means to be literate will need to adapt as well. I hope this snapshot of key concepts in reading theory prompts some ideas that you might want to explore further in your work in Unit 2. You can find some additional topic ideas and links on the Week 7 page of our course website.